So the next tabs that we have here are the country overview and the supply chain tabs. And these two sheets are similar to each other because they both require the entry of text. So for example, here on the country overview sheet, you'll be providing background information, specifying the scope of the risk assessment, and then also providing a shorter summary and a full description, painting a broader picture of risk as it exists in the country or the region for the risk assessment that you're completing. And similarly, on the supply chain sheet, you'll see a space down here for entering a long form text that speaks to the trade and supply chain and how it's typically managed, and then using these questions as a prompt. Let's take a look at the country overview sheet of the risk assessment template with some examples filled in. So first, let's take a closer look at some of the information that it's asking for. It asks for the geographical scope, the country or countries that are being assessed. For companies or certificate holders that have a lot of suppliers, this could be a list of several countries from where commodities are being sourced. If you're a country level expert filling out a risk assessment for a country, then this is just the country name. Note here I've just put Vietnam. It could be that you are assessing on a geographical scope that is subnational. If that's the case, specify what that geographical scope is here in this cell, and if not, just insert NA. Because we're doing a risk assessment for Vietnam, for example, I'm just entering NA here. In the next row, you'll select and input the commodities that are impacted. So you have two options here, and it really doesn't matter which option you select. The first is the product classification from Annex 1 of the EUDR. This may be helpful to you if you're filling out the risk assessment template primarily for the purposes of EUDR compliance and you happen to know those product classification codes or have them close at hand. You can also use the codes that come from FSC STD 40004A. That's our product classification standard. So for example, in the case of Vietnam, I will be doing a risk assessment of rubber and latex, and this is our code that's coming from the FSC standard. So I would input that here. Of course, you could have more than one commodity, and you could enlist that here as well. Under indicator coverage, this drop-down menu is asking you to select from all indicators, single indicator, or group of indicators. Because multiple users might be filling out the same sheet, we need to make it customizable for multiple situations. So it could be that you're filling out a complete risk assessment, and in that case, you would select all indicators. If you're filling out a partial risk assessment that covers just a single indicator or a group of indicators, perhaps by theme or a group of themes, you would select the option that is appropriate to you here, and then under specific indicators, you would write that in. So I am only doing those which relate to taxes and trade, for example, and then I would list the indicator number. Below, it's asking for a long form text description. So you'll see down here, you have an option for a short summary, and an option for a full description. Both of these must be filled out. So it may be functionally easier to work on this full description first, and then when you're finished, take the most relevant details and the most characteristic pieces of information and compile them in a paragraph to be put here. So maybe save this bit for last. So we'll go ahead and go down to the full description part now. You have two options. Full description. Here in this cell, if you've already prepared a full description in another word processing document or similar, you're welcome to just enter that in here. Text, 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 just as above. Hopefully it's longer than this. But the procedure is asking for lots of different kinds of information, and in order to build a narrative that's both comprehensive but also tailored to the country for which you're assessing risk, it's also useful to select from the options under the key aspect column. So there is a drop-down menu in this column that allows you to select from multiple options: land use and agricultural characteristics, sustainability and environmental considerations, etc., legal context, context of certification. You can select the key topics that are most important to you, so let's say relevant industry practices, and this is where I'll type my description of relevant industry practices in Vietnam that are relevant for the purposes of assessing risk. You can see an example of information I've already entered here above. So, for example, I have a short paragraph on ownership, management, and tenure characteristics, and a small paragraph on land use and agricultural characteristics. So you have two options. You can do your own full description and include the full text here, or you can leave this blank and build out your description paragraph by paragraph by selecting the relevant key aspect in the left column and providing the description in the right. Now let's talk about the Supply Chain and Transparency tab. This section is concerned with the structure of the sector in order to understand in greater detail the transparency and traceability of wood products through supply chains. What this sheet asks for is a long-form description, approximately 200 to 300 words or more if applicable, which describes the general picture of transparency and traceability of supply chain in the country listed in the Country Overview tab. Also in the yellow box at the top, you'll see a more detailed prompt listing several considerations for formulating your answer. So here is the area where you would fill that information in. At the bottom of the text box, there's also a table here that asks you to provide key documents for mapping the supply chain and verifying the various entities that compose the supply chain. So here, it's just asking for a short reference name for any documents that would be useful in mapping the supply chain of the commodity being assessed, or any documents that relate to the description mentioned above. And then you would select from here, note whether the document relevant to verified trade links or entities in the supply chain, whether it's relevant, whether it's required. Any additional comments can go in this cell. Let's quickly go back to the top and I'll show you an example of a filled out version of the supply chain tab. So here again is this yellow box with all of the questions, and then below I've included my text summary of the supply chain and all of the considerations that I have to take into account when it comes to Vietnam. And I'm done.